can I maybe get an indication? How many of you are actively pursuing, at least trying, or in some way have implemented Sabbath in your life over the last year or so? Maybe more. That's probably more than half of you. That's really, really good news. So let's grow together in this. Reading Jeremiah 6 verse 16. This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. But you said, we will not walk in it. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it. And if you walk in the good way, you'll find shalom. But you said you will not walk in it. No, that does not sound very smart to say that. But this scripture just highlights the condition of the human heart. Because God holds his ways before us and say, I came that you may have life and have it in abundance. And then we say, I will not walk in it. And we continue with what we think bring life. Obviously not in all things, obviously not all of you. But that is the condition of the human heart that rebels against God, that we see playing out here. It was the story of the Israelites always. God comes with his love and we reject it. So if we could find the ancient paths, the good way, there are designs that God made for life. There are his ways in which we are to live this life in. And if we would live in harmony with the way that the Creator intended it, then things work better. It's as simple as that. There are principles, there are universal principles that works because he made it that way. He made us in that way. And if we can find those ways, his design, his ways, and there's so many of them, then we can find life in it. Jesus said a similar thing when he said, well, if you hear these things I say and do them, then you are like one that builds his house on the rock, and when the storms come, it will not go to ruins. Your house is built on the rock. Your house, you are secure. You won't be ruined if you listen and obey the things that he says. Now, we don't listen and obey to the things he say in order that we may be okay with him and he not be upset with us and we might one day enter heaven. No, for that we run to Jesus. But then when we are with him and we're justified, we're safe for all eternity, then he says, I've got ways. And the heart that's been born again, the spirit that's been made alive, that was dead, that was made alive in you, yearns for the ways of God. It yearns for his ways. It yearns for his truth. Your flesh and your soul says, no, don't want it. But your spirit's crying out for it. And as we're working out our salvation, I believe we should give heed to those things that the spirit is yearning for so that it can come and be made manifest through our souls and our bodies. You want to find rest for your soul? Find the ways of God that leads to life. So, one of these things is called Sabbath. It's one of the most beautiful things that he created for us. God rested, and you're made in his image. You're made that way. You're made to work that way. It's the design given at creation. Remember that before the law of Moses, the law of Moses says a lot of things. It speaks about Sabbath, and we'll get to that. But before that, in the Garden of Eden, Sabbath was part of the original design. God rested from his work. And so he made us and said, you will do the same. It's one of the most, if you're looking for ancient paths, the few that are more ancient than that one. Okay? That one came with creation. When Adam was 1 day old, it came. So, ancient enough. Interesting, God cannot become tired. He doesn't sleep, he doesn't slumber, it says. So he didn't rest because he was tired. It's a worldly understanding to understand rest as being something we do because we are tired. God rested to delight in his work. He would stop, look at it, delight in it. That we know. And we know that he came to walk with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. So it seems that God rested, he ceased work to delight and for relationship. Not because I'm very tired. But when we don't rest like that and for that purpose, we have to rest because we get tired. Work, get tired, rest. No. That's what God did. So God worked and rested. We rest and work. Adam's first day was rest day. We work and then rest. That's what makes us different. That's the way that we work. And we're made to work. And then not work. When I speak about Sabbath, I do speak about a 1 day a week thing, and we'll get there, but just something good to highlight is that it also seems that he didn't work mornings and evenings. It was evening and it was morning the second day. It was evening and it was morning the third day. And then God said. So he worked in daytime. And then at the end of that day, he would look at it. So we could say, hey, there's still some sunshine left in the day when he stopped and he looked at it and say, this is awesome. And then he did not work. It was evening, it was morning the next day, and then he worked again. So there's a Sabbath kind of rest in God's perfect ways that has us do other things in mornings, evenings, and nights as an ideal. Okay. So from the creation narrative, does the creation narrative make sense? You understand that Sabbath comes from there? It was given there as part of the perfect way things were set out, and not because we would become tired, but because he wanted us to stop and rest and delight, to stop for delight and relationship's sake. So then we move on a bit. Interesting, what I found a while back, but you might know that the Sabbath and observing the Sabbath is in the 10 Commandments. Have you read that? When last did you go read the good old 10 Commandments? Well, if it wasn't for that, then we wouldn't have known that it's bad not to steal. Really? That's where it comes from. Before that, you could probably steal and it wouldn't have been bad. It has helped civilized society a heck of a lot. And if you read through them, you would realize that as a Christian, you would definitely want to keep, most Christians would definitely want to keep 9 of them. You would want to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. You would not want to blaspheme his name. You don't want to make any carved images and bow down before him. You don't want to murder. You don't want to, steal, adultery, covet. Honor your father and mother. We'd say to all those things, yeah, that should be a law in your heart. Don't murder. That's a good one to write down and just remember. Okay? Right? Yeah. But there is one that within a lot of Christian circles, we don't. And it's called Sabbath. That's very interesting. Now, Sabbath, like we see, unlike the others, most of them, does not even come from the creation narrative. It was there before the law. And then right at the end of the law, when we read through the law that was given to Moses, Exodus 20 all the way through to Exodus 31, read the last paragraph where God lays out the law. He lays down the law. The last paragraph, you know what it says? Dun, 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 this is the end of the law. All these things, don't kill each other, don't commit all these horrible sins. And then it says, you are to speak to my people Israel and say, above all, you're to keep my Sabbaths. It was there before the law, and at the end of the law, he said, listen, there's one I want to just elevate above all the others, and that's keeping the Sabbaths. Huh? Ever seen that before? Well, if you were here last year, you would have. So all I'm trying to say is that God's always had something for this. But somehow in the majority of the Christian world that I've been a part of growing up, we try to find ways to not look at the Sabbath as something that we have to do. And you know why? Because a lot of us are stuck in legalism. If you look at it from a legalistic point of view and say, well, you don't have to keep the Sabbath because we're not under the law anymore, that means you are stuck in legalism. Because the only reason you would want to keep it is for the sake of the law, but now it's not the law, so now you don't keep it, which means that you believe in the law and that you should observe it. So you're not free to follow God in his ways. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So, because to say, well, it's not the Lord. Jesus died and raised again, so I don't have to keep the Sabbath in order to be okay with God. That's very problematic because that's rejecting the things that God gives to us and saying, well, I don't have to, luckily I don't have to do them in order to be saved, so now I don't want to do them anyway. But what if that thing is from the very heart of God for you and for his glory? Then it doesn't matter that much if the righteous requirement of the law has been paid for by Jesus. Then after you've been born again, you get excited to understand these things that he has put in place for all time. And so as Jesus does, he summarized it for us pretty well. He said, firstly, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. So he just said, I'm the boss. I know what this thing is. He said he's the Lord of the Sabbath. And then he said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was made as a gift for you. A gift from God for you. The Sabbath was made for man. Physiologically even, we need to rest one day in 7. We're made that way. Our bodies are made that way. The world's always worked on 7-day weeks. Why would that be like that? Because that's the way God created it. He made it that way and said, I'm going to give you a beautiful gift. And it's called Sabbath. And he gave it to us. Not us, so that we should observe this thing called Sabbath. But Sabbath was given to us so that when we observe it, we'd see God in it and find his blessing in it. But when you read this, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. For years when I read it, it kind of made me want to observe Sabbath less. Because I was like, oh, awesome. So Jesus took away all these laws, and this is one of them. So now he's saying nice things like that, so it's made for man, not for man for the Sabbath. So I don't have to. But I've realized, as I said earlier, that way of thinking about it is like I didn't understand that he's a loving father that has got good gifts that he wants to give me. And if I know him and I love him, then I'd run to them. and embrace them and say, there's nothing I want more. That's what I said when I came to salvation, and that's what I said whenever I worship. That's what my spirit's crying out for. So I do want whatever he would give me. If he says something is made for you, then I want to observe that way more than I want to observe a cold law in order to justify myself. That's me. I've briefly touched on this, but the fact that the whole world has always been working in 7 days just speaks to this. And once during the French Revolution, they tried to change it to a 10-day work week. And after about 12 years or so, there was a great societal collapse because people rested one day in, I think 10 days, 12 years, or something like that. Sorry, but they tried to change it to 10-day work weeks, work 9, rest 1. Societal collapse, they changed it back. How amazing is it that God's design has been, it's been like that throughout history, and every people group that we work with, that's how it is. So what is Sabbath? So if I'm getting you excited for keeping this thing that's been there from ever and that's been exalted above all the other laws, but somehow religion has got us to believe we don't have to observe it, which is the wrong way to think about it in the first place. It feels to me that the devil's got a way of keeping us out of the best things that God has for us. And Sabbath, I want to put you, is one of them. The way I would define Sabbath for now is that I believe it is a gift given by God, woven into the fabric of human existence at creation. It is a holy day where we cease from our work and celebrate life with God 1 day a week, every week. That's what I believe it is. Now, if you say Sabbath was made for man, what does that mean? What does this gift look like? What am I receiving when I'm receiving Sabbath? Now, for me, the very fact that God so designed it is enough for me to so want it. And if the fruits of it would only be evident in eternity, then that's okay. But the fruits of it is evident almost from the first time you do it. It's so awesome. For what? When you start this practice, you start, especially those of us who are always busy. Anyone with, it's sometimes got the busyness disease in their life? So much to do. It's just really busy week. Really busy. We feel, we still sometimes feel great when we say that. Just like that. That means people want what I have, and I have to give a lot of it. A little bit more than what I have, you know, but you have to do what you have to do. But if you start keeping Sabbath, especially when you've got a lot to do, then you automatically, by default, start growing in faith that God can do more than you. That He's able to do more if you start resting. University, I started resting 1 day a week, even in exams. Then I would write the Monday, then the Sunday I wouldn't study at all. I just did it that way. And it just worked. It was one of the most supernatural and wonderful things that I did. Whereas most of the time, I and most people I know would just say, well, I've got stuff to do now, and there's a lot of it, so unfortunately I can't do Sabbath now. You've got the opportunity to grow in faith by actually putting out your faith in something that God made, to see that God can do more than you and do it better. So you grow in faith by keeping it. It is worship to God because you're saying as his child, I love what you've made and I want it. That glorifies him. A father who looks at his child, and if my son comes and this gift you gave me, I love it. I ride this bike every day. It's the most amazing thing that you've ever given me. The Father loves that. It is worship unto him. It's health to your bones. Stress and anxiety and these things are the illnesses of our day. And Sabbath is designed to speak straight into that. It's there for relational fulfillment, to take that time out where you're intentionally not going to do the things that you really believe you have to, and you're going to intentionally spend time with the people that matters most to you. And his ways, his ancient paths that leads to life, I believe a lot of that life in abundance is locked up in it. It's a fantastic holiday that you ring fence, one of them every week. So you are going to have a great day every week. That's life in abundance, and that's your good Father that planned it like that. Would you not want that? So, I would say if you do practice Sabbath, you grow in faith by default. You have time to be with God and loved ones. You do things you love, and you rest and get restored, and God is glorified by the peace and joy that will become your portion. If you don't practice Sabbath, I believe we do violence to our souls. It's not the way we were designed. We do violence to those around us because we work too much, and we do violence to that which God has called us for because we're doing it in the flesh and not in faith by saying that I want to do it in your way. It's moving outside the limits that God has assigned to mankind and trusting in the strength of the flesh. Whenever we say, it's not possible for me at the moment to keep Sabbath, all I'm saying is the strength of my flesh is going to produce more results now in whatever way it is than what the power of God can while I rest. That's a massive leap of faith to take. But God rewards those who does that. He rewards those who steps out in faith in the things that He has designed, the things that He calls us into. So, I would advise that we receive the Sabbath as a gift from God. Number one. Number two, I would advise that you set it apart so that you don't take it lightly. Because otherwise you say, well, this is awesome, and I will do it whenever I can. But it seems like we've got plans for this weekend with friends, and it's going to be like Sabbath-ish vibes, or and we've got this thing on, and we've got that thing on, and you're not deliberate. You don't see it as a holy day that you should think carefully of when you plan it, and then you kind of just stumble through days. It's a wonderful way to start such a Sabbath day is to do something ceremonial like lighting a candle, or switching your phone off and putting it into a drawer or something like that, to just remind yourself that right now I'm going to cease from work and I'm going to switch over into a different way of living, the way I live when I live Sabbath days. So what do you do on a Sabbath day? Eugene Peterson writes and says that after 35 years of practicing Sabbath, him and his wife have now come to defining it very simply as it is a day on which we pray and play. I think it's the best definition. It took him 35 years. And he says that's what we do. We pray and we play. So for most of us, we get way too analytical. So what do you actually do on the Sabbath? What's allowed? Like, I don't want to have that conversation. Well, draai of braai. Pray and play. But then for the slightly more analytical, you've got guys like Pete Scazzero and John Mark Comer. I hope that's how you write their names. I just wrote them. I just typed them out very quickly just before I got here. But anyway, they would define it, and I love this too, as stop, rest, delight, worship. So what they do is they say there's a deliberate ceasing of work. That's where you light the candle and you refuse an email and you do not do anything that you have to do. That's that stop part. And it's helpful if you say, well, from 7 o'clock I stop. It's helpful. But the one thing you do is you cease work. You don't say things like, well, that kind of work is actually like rest to me. Like, no. The next thing is you rest, so sleep in, have naps, relax, lie on the couch, read a book, just take it slow. Okay? Number 3 is delight, or then play. Do amazing things that you love. Things that you could do with God, and that's beautiful. So work things out that you believe is with God and with others, with friends, close friends, not friends that always gives you hassles. Close friends. And I mean, to be very honest, not all family engagements can form part of a Sabbath. Really. Alice says very few can. So, plan that well too. Who are you going to be with? What are you going to do? Will that be delight to your soul? Will that be something you can do with God and delight in? Those are things you work out. The last one is to worship. Pete Scazzero says contemplate. John Mark Comer says worship. But to reflect on the goodness and the love of God, to receive His goodness, to think about His goodness, to receive His love, to drink it in, to reflect on it, to be with Him. And I think that's a great summary of what you can actually do once you've decided and understood that this is something beautiful that God has designed for us to have, and that would make us grow in faith automatically when we do. So, very practically, what do we do? So we made a few changes to this, but I'll still share it in this format. We're still working on the changes, so they're maybe not fully in place yet. But our Sabbath is on a Friday. So if I do reply to your message on a Friday, you can actually say, hey, what are you doing? Really? Who of you that have tried or that has implemented Sabbath have also messed it up royally on many occasions? Okay. So won't we just always do that? Yes, we will. It's okay. And God smiles at us. But then we go back and we try to work into this beautiful thing more and more with His help. Okay? So I also mess it up, and sometimes I would find myself just thinking, well, whatever, I just have to reply to that voice note. But I shouldn't have listened to it in the first place. That was the mistake I made. Anyway, we start on a Thursday night. With date night. We're now moving that to Fridays, but I'm going to talk as if it's still the old way. But we start with a date night on a Thursday evening, and that's kind of our candle lighting ceremony, if I may. So we stop. We don't do anything else on a Thursday night, and we want an early night on that night. Then the next morning, me and Jock go for a jog. And we have this habit where we jog very slowly for 6.3 kilometers to Seattle. I don't know what you call that area. But through the waterfront, it's beautiful, through the promenade. And the whole time while we're jogging, we share good news. Just say, what's good in your life right now? And then I'd share for 45 minutes, and he'd share for 45 minutes, and that is it. So we run, then we get a coffee, then we walk the coffee out, then we run back. It's about an hour and a half exercise. We just share good news. One of the best Sabbath activities I have. It's one of the anchors in my week that I've been holding. That's been keeping me alive for the last few years. Then we come home, and we do, me and Ronald, if you've got kids, this might be helpful. So we found this thing of giving each other slots to have quiet time is rather helpful. So, Liffy, it's your turn now. You can have 3 hours. I'll maintain resemblance of order at home. And then you go on your own with your journaling into La La Land and do whatever you want. Go. Yeah, whatever works, but we give each other breaks. We do this on holidays as well. So every day we'd be like, okay, when's going to be my slot? When's going to be your slot? And we would go sit with God. Then I take my son to sport, and I walk around the field that he's got sport in, and I pray, and I think about stuff, and I look at Table Mountain. And then in the afternoon is family time, so then we'd go walk on the promenade or light an early fire or whatever might come, or we'll spend time with close friends or whatever it is. But that's just very practically more or less what we do. And what I think at this stage praying and playing and delighting and those things look like for us. So, that is my little teaching on the Sabbath. And I would now love to hear from you guys. If you've got any questions on it that you'd like to ask, maybe I wasn't clear about something, maybe I was very quick running through things, I don't know. Or maybe there was something I didn't touch. I might not know the answer, maybe one of you do. So questions that you have on this. And then also, if there are awesome things that you have learned in your journey that you think, I'd like to share that, he didn't share that, I think that can be helpful. I would love for you to share that as well. Okay? So maybe take 30 seconds and just think about if you have a question about this that you'd like us to discuss as a group, and if you've got any learnings that you maybe would like to share with us. Or the other thing is, if you are practicing but you're stuck somehow in some place with something, and you can also just ask if you want. Any questions or inputs? No particular order.
Hi weer, hallo allemaal. I'll ask the simpler question first. So exercise on the Sabbath. It seems like you're jogging. Is there any wisdom maybe you can share around that? What, like, is all exercise okay, or is there something like that you would say okay, but if you go with it in that mindset or whatever, that's maybe not the best idea.
Is boxing okay? He wants to know if he can punch people on the Sabbath. Or they punch you. Oh, on a Sabbath, they can punch you. No low. Work it out with Jesus. That's what I would say. The only kind of exercise I think is really not helpful is something that you do in a vain pursuit, or in a selfish pursuit. Anything that comes from selfish ambition, I've always wanted to do that, so I'm going to do that. So now you train so hard, but that's got nothing to do with the Sabbath, really. You should just, like Alice said, never do that. Or, this kind of gymming. But that's not Sabbath, eh? That's just Christian life. So my answer is you work it out with Jesus. I run slow on Sabbath, but I run slow I run slow. That's what I do. More. You said there was a more harder question. You can keep it for later.
Maybe just to hear, is there anything that you guys like prep or plan for before the time to make sure that you're not doing it on the Sabbath day?
That's a phenomenal point. That's something we haven't done yet, but we really want to do meal planning better for Sabbaths, so that we don't have to. Yeah. So we haven't done it, but it's been on the radar. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Sometimes you love on my birthday night, I asked if I could please braai, because it's one of the most amazing, restful things I could do. So it also depends.
Something for me that's been helpful is I try to limit screen time on doing Sabbath, and then also putting my cell phone on grayscale. So, because I'm used to just looking on my phone, so if it's gray, it reminds me that I don't really want to spend time wandering on my phone on that day. And then the other thing is, what they say is, don't do things that you can do on other days on the Sabbath. So many times you have little stuff that you want to get done, but you can do it on another day. So that just helps to block out that time to not use your Sabbath to catch up on admin or things like that. It's a helpful reminder for me to just think, this we can actually do on another day. So purposefully don't spend time doing it on that day.
Thank you. I do think the phone is the thing that would probably steal your Sabbath the most. So make a plan.
Alice has been telling a couple of people about the podcast about John Mark Comer. Can't remember now. Was it other guy? Pete something? Oh. But it's really good. I highly recommend it to everyone. I listened to it on my way to Sri Lanka because we had time. And one thing that really stood out for me, a point that they made that makes me stop and think thrice, more than twice, is he mentioned that walking away from God is a sin. We know that. But so is being ahead of God and not being in alignment with Him. So often on Sabbath, I often think, am I running ahead of God or am I next to Him? And that really helped me to not think like I actually need to plan everything or even plan Sabbath, which I also got anxious about. But then actually just spending time and being next to God, and I often just picture Him next to me, and then I feel at peace.
I'm interested to hear opinions on keeping the Sabbath as one continuous day. Or I know some people go for an excuse and, well, not necessarily an excuse, but no, I'll take 2 hours here and then 3 hours there and then the rest I'll take on Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
I had a friend at university that's he really didn't like studying, but he was incredibly smart. So he told me that one day he figured out his exam roster, his studying plan now. He's worked out how much he must study and how regularly he'd have to take breaks and how long they should be. And so what he's going to do now is he's going to take all the break time and he's going to have it before he's going to start studying, and then he's going to start studying and not break. It kind of sounds like that. So I think there's a difference between taking breaks and Sabbath. So, I mean, like, it's not a legalistic thing. But if you want to contend for Sabbath, then that's not it. Yeah, that's what I would say. And what's worked so beautifully for us is to actually understand the beauty in the Hebrew culture. The day starts in the evening at 6 o'clock. So you start your Sabbath in the evening. That's why we started on the evening, date night evening. So the evening you start it after you've done with work, and you extend it into the next evening, and then it stops there. But I mean, what do you do in the evening most of the time is you have dinner. So it's kind of longer in a way. But starting not in the morning but in the evening has made a world of difference to us. So just small things in the way that this has been designed all the while is just really, really good. Does that answer? Yeah.
Bit of an odd question, but is it fine to Sabbath for more than one day?
So I had a friend at university who loved... You can take holiday whenever you like, but Henny Swart said one day, well, if we're going to be so harsh about Sabbath, then we should also just say that it's God said work 6 and rest 1. So what's been awesome to me is that on a Saturday I can work. So I can actually open my laptop and send that last mail, or if Ronald and the kids are at some birthday party, then I can do stuff because I work 6 days. And I love working 6 days. And whether that's doing some things at the house, whether that's doing this or that, or whether that's actually doing some work and like catching up on stuff, that's meant a lot to me. I actually feel free on a Saturday to work because I'm resting 1. So that's the design really that works well. But I mean, whatever.
What are your thoughts on trying to Sabbath on a Sunday where you're on a serving team at church? Do you think that's even possible, or would you say that's going to disrupt your Sabbath too much?
Yeah, so one would often want to do things on a Saturday, right? So you'd want to go to Builders and go fix a few things and and go to that. Because some kind of kids parties are Sabbath, but then there's other kind of children's parties that aren't on Sabbath. It's got nothing to do with the children at all. No, so I do not think if you're serving on a Sunday that would qualify as your Sabbath. I would want to advocate that Sabbathing on a Saturday is probably the easiest for those who serve hard in church. And then one can probably take the rest of Sunday and say, well, is there things to get done? At least Builders is open 7 days a week. So, I mean, if it's that, check a 60-62 works. So if you can then just maybe say, okay, cool, so those things I wanted to do, I'm actually going to do it on Sunday and rest Saturday. And also alternate that. So if we see something's happening on a Friday, we're flying out on a mission or whatever, then we would try and move that for a week. We would try and move that around. Does that answer? Yeah. More questions or comments?
So my journey with Sabbath has definitely been up and down. But what I'm wondering is I have found myself on weeks where there's a lot of things to do. Like some weeks it's easy, but some weeks there are a lot of things to do. And then I find myself stressing. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, shit, but ek moet werk. I need to work, but I can't, it's Sabbath. So it doesn't feel like rest in that moment. Is that something you kind of work out with God and you're like, Here, verander my? Or is that, is there anything practical in that sense that you can kind of do?
Yeah, so I mean, our natural way wouldn't want that. But that's why I said you automatically grow in faith when you start doing Sabbath. And it's that believing that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Is that believing that he created it as part of the creation story. It's been there throughout. He's given it as a gift to us. It's part of that faith that makes me go, this is going to be so cool if I do nothing about this because of God. Is that faith that then gets me out of it. And then if I would still struggle with anxiety, because we struggle with anxiety for many different reasons, and there might be very deep-rooted reasons for that, then that's something else one would want to deal with in a specific counseling context or with a psychologist or whatever. But I wouldn't just give in respond to the anxiety. Anxiety should definitely not be the one that tells us what to do. Is a harsh boss.
Let's say you have a young child, as you do and I do. You mentioned, giving slots for quiet time. Would you think it unwise to even do different days for Sabbath? So, for example, I work a 4-day work week. I could potentially take my Sabbath on a Friday, and then my wife take hers on a Saturday. Do you see that as being a problem, or do you think something like that would work?
I think in a specific season of your life with young kids where everything is chaos, definitely. I would say when out of that season, it would be nice to have it with your wife. But absolutely, yeah. You make plans with these kind of things.
I don't know how far to hold this. You briefly mentioned in the creation account, there's work in the day, rest in the evening, rest in the morning. Question mark. How much do you uphold that? How much does that influence your rest?
Because it's not clearly stated anywhere else, but it's just observed when you imagine what happened. I like to interpret it then as my view is that if that's the way God wrote it for us to see it, and he didn't make that explicit, then I'm going to kind of take it with the same softness into my life. For me, there is handrails in that. There is very clear handrails in that. So that if my work, if I just always work until 9 o'clock, but I can assure you that that's detrimental to many more things in your life. And the fact that knowing that working until 9 o'clock is detrimental to your marriage and your children and your health and your ability to switch off and sleep and blah, 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 makes that what you observe and imagine from the creation account make a lot of sense. And then you keep the handrails. That's how I look at it. Yeah. Last one.
Just wanted to make sure Lo didn't get the mic back. Kidding. I just have a question, actually. So, when I was still working with Office, or where I was working, my previous job, really enjoy my new job. Sometimes the manager or the boss or someone of authority above you would give you a job to finish or complete, and there'd be a deadline the next day, which I'm sure most of you have been exposed to. In that sense, or if they ask you to come in on your Sabbath, I know the biblical term would be to say no and contend for Sabbath, but if you know the implications of it.
No, I wouldn't say no. I would have principled discussions with the right attitude. I'd have discussions with my manager about the principles that I would love to live by because of what I believe and what I believe from the creation account and from who God is and what He has given me and how that works. So I would want those discussions so that when He comes to you in that situation, say, hey, I know, but I'd really like you to do X, Y, Z. Then, there are other scriptures that's very clear about the fact that if you are a Christian and you're a slave, that you should obey Him, you should serve Him as you serve Christ. And you can't then say, listen, but I've got my boundaries as a slave. So there's a way of being Christ to the world, as a way of sacrifice, where that is what we have to do. So I do not want to say that you should say no, because I think that would be the wrong approach. But most people I know is not in that boat. They're in the I'm willfully being abused boat, and always saying yes boat, and always having stuff, and always having no handrails kind of a boat. I'm not having those discussions. So that helps. Hard work we should be doing a lot of, but hard rest as well. Okay, I said that's the last one. So if something is burning on your heart, then you can raise your hand very quickly, otherwise we're done. Well,
so if we should work 6 days and rest 1, most of us only work 5 days. That leaves 1 day.
So that's your problem to deal with. So I've got work for you. Really, I do. So I believe you should work 6 and rest 1. I believe that. But what work is there's a lot of stuff I have to do. I have to sort out my banking stuff. I have to sort out my new passport. I have to sort out the children's whatever documentations and this. I have to do all the groceries as I do weekly. I have to go to builder's warehouse. I have to fix that light. Those things are work. That's not Sabbath. So working for it's actually beautifully designed. It's designed within a Christian framework that we would work 5 days for someone, 1 day for whatever you have to do, and rest a day. It's a wonderful design. But if you're struggling with that 1 day, please let me know. Okay. Thank you so much. And it was lovely. I hope you are inspired to keep on taking hold of this gift that God has given us, that sustains us, and that glorifies Him, and that grows our faith, and that's been there from the creation narrative all the way through.